So the RCMP have charged four men in connection with what the CBC is calling an extremist plot to create an anti-government militia. At least two of the men involved were active members of the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, there aren't a ton of specifics about how these men planned on overthrowing the government, but I want to talk about what motivates this kind of behavior. What made these young men want to violently end Canadian democracy and replace it with something else, presumably something that would put them at the top. Well, like all people who crave drama, it's a need for control. And yeah, these drama queens wanted control. They were bored of not being in power. They didn't like how things are, which is fair. I don't love how our current form of government is either. I'd much prefer proportional representation, and I would prefer that MPs be barred from owning rental properties. I'd prefer they be barred from holding any positions that pay them more than a public school teacher makes for the next 10 years after leaving office. And I would like a 4-day work week. Now, I don't think any of those desires were what was motivating these young men, because the rules that I would love to impose on our government wouldn't just narrowly benefit me. They'd benefit everyone and help bring down wealth inequality. But typically, what motivates people to want to tip over the board and shout, "I'm done playing this game," isn't that they recognize that the game isn't fair for most of us. It isn't even that they understand that the rules don't apply the same to everyone, and that there's a number of very wealthy people who pull the strings to ensure that they get more wealth that they don't even need and relegate the rest of us to poverty and death. The fact is, many of us are vulnerable to radicalization. The capitalist system we're trapped in constantly tells us that we're not worth as much as we are, that we're not as good as we are. It tells your neighbor that you're not worth what you are, and it tells you that your neighbor has no value. It can be very tough for all of us when we experience a life that feels unfair to not feel justified in blaming those who are in close proximity to us. But it's important to remember that the same need for control that in these young men inspired them to take up arms against their country and have warped violent fantasies is the same need for control that inspires parents to harm their kids and some TikTok creators to make unhelpful videos that get lots of views. If you notice in yourself a strong desire to control, to make others pay, to hold them to what you think justice is, that may be a good time to remember that you have the option to put your phone down and go spend some time with your family or friends. But pick people in your life who won't encourage your delusion that you can hurt people enough to make them good.